Hi, my name is Grant Polay with 5D Logos Talk. Let's talk about rapport. What is it? Well, it's that connection we make with people. Have you ever met someone new and suddenly you're engaged in great conversation? Well, one word that can describe that situation, rapport. Does it mean that you're exactly like the person? Well, of course not, because we all have differences. But what usually happens when we find someone like us, well, we like that. And that is the principle of rapport. People like people who are like them. Notice, it doesn't mean liking a person because they like you. It is liking a person because the other person is similar to you. It is those similarities that produce feelings of liking someone. Now, we often think rapport is just a byproduct, something we observe but have absolutely no control. Rapport can actually be felt inside of us. You see, you can feel when you're in rapport with another person. If you feel that there's a disconnect, there are specific techniques that can get you into rapport with another person right away. By the way, this is not about manipulating people or being fake. You should always be your authentic self, but also should be mindful of what unites versus what divides. This concept uses the hierarchy of ideas. And if you notice on the whiteboard, as you use broader concepts, you find more common ground with people. The intention is to be broad and not specific. And that has the effect of lowering people's critical thinking. That's called chunking up. For example, it's like if you tell someone, look, you're a human, I'm a human, we both live on the planet Earth, and as part of the human family, we want to find happiness, find love, and to be loved. We want to find purpose and enjoy our lives. That would place many people into a more hypnotic mindset. I've even heard it described as strategic ambiguity, and that's what politicians and large companies love to use by being intentionally vague and avoiding answering questions. Yet, if you find agreement with the person, but get overly specific, you will find less agreement. The specificity is what begins to highlight differences between people, and that is what's called chunking down. For example, most people will acknowledge the need for healthy eating and exercise. You'll not find too much disagreement with that. But then if you get very specific about how you only eat organic food or gluten-free, well, then you might find people have different beliefs and opinions. Some will only eat organic, while others will think it's a ripoff. Now, the point's not for us to get into that type of conversation, but that specificity is what gets people thinking. It puts them less in a hypnotic mindset. If you want to see the best example of chunking up versus chunking down, look at that interaction between a politician and an investigative reporter. You see, the politician, he wants to chunk up and be broad, while the reporter wants to chunk down and be specific to address a controversy. If we look at exercise, most people will agree that exercise is necessary for good health. But then some people are really into CrossFit, and they think that that's the very best. Or others will advocate for weightlifting. And then there's people who are into cardio, and they feel differently. Again, the point of this is not to become neurotic about watching every single thing we say. No, that's not the point. The intention is to highlight how if you're not in rapport with the person, it is this hierarchy of ideas that is a useful psychological model to understand what's occurring in that conversational context. The question is, do you need to chunk up or do you need to chunk down? You see, you can use language and communication with greater skill to produce the results you want. Now, here's a simple example. If you're in a job interview, your goal is to build rapport, right? So you will find yourself speaking in much broader terms, such as being a team player, working hard, paying attention to details. You're going to be chunking up. You would want to avoid being too specific unless it's requested. And then even then, you want to stick to safe examples. In other words, chunk down, but don't chunk too far down. Another example is if a person's looking for a romantic partner. Now, some people will be too broad and not specific enough in describing themselves. But in this case, you want to be very specific, even if it risks having less agreement. That is, you want to chunk down. Now, this topic of rapport can be expounded on for hundreds of hours. Basically, it's the same meaning as having common ground with someone. Try it today when you meet someone new. Remember, these are concepts that you practice. They're not just these academic ideas in your head. Observe other people's conversation and see if those two people have rapport. If you see or observe a disconnect, one person's probably thinking big picture while the other person's getting overly detailed. One person's chunking up and that other person's chunking down. If you have a boss who's very hard to please, ask yourself whether you need to chunk up or whether you need to chunk down. I hope this discussion of rapport helps in all of your relationships. This is Grant Pole with 5D Logos Talk.